We're not in a quorum? Quorum or no? Madam President.
Senator from Ohio.
I thank the presiding officer from Minnesota. I want to start by thanking my colleagues, Leader Schumer and Senator Klobuchar, for their work to honor the Capitol police officers who risked their lives to protect this country 1 year ago tomorrow. In the year since that dark day, we've learned more about all that those officers endured from the terrorists who stormed the Capitol, the racist slurs, the physical abuse, the mental injuries. We know things were so much worse than they appeared in the original reporting as more and more details have come out. These terrorists gouged someone's eyes out. They killed a Capitol police officer and injured 140 others. They threatened to kill the vice president. They brought a noose to the Capitol and paraded symbols of white supremacy. In fact, the people that broke in to the office upstairs from my office in the Capitol we have this on film, used flagpoles with Confederate flags and Trump flags attached to them. They brought equipment to take hostages. And it wasn't only Capitol police officers who endured this attack and put their lives on the line serving our republic on January 6th. Workers throughout the Capitol risked everything that day. Workers who do the radio and television broadcasts and work in the media center, workers who work the floor, workers who clean up, workers who do food service. They often don't get noticed like the Capitol support staff. Every day, Capitol janitorial and maintenance and other workers, essential workers, do their jobs with skill and dedication and dignity. They've shown up for work during this pandemic. Those workers were here on January 6th doing their job when the insurrectionists, when the rioters, when the, call it what you want, traitors, stormed this building, barging into this chamber, acting as if no one would ever hold them responsible or accountable for their violence, for their disregard for American values and for U.S. law. When their rampage was over, we know it was the largely black and brown custodial and maintenance workers who were left to restore dignity to the Capitol. Their work continued, their work, first of all, allowed us to continue to come back and continue our work at 8 o'clock that night, certifying the electoral votes and securing our democracy. As we know, domestic terrorists destroyed, black and brown custodians cleaned up, and maintenance workers, carpenters, painters, union members rebuilt. Today we honor them. Some of the most enduring, moving images of that day are the pictures of these workers sweeping up the mess that terrorists made in the People's House. That night after we voted, the senator from Minnesota was there. We were all there voting in this chamber. After the police had cleared, and the National Guard and the D.C. police, the Capitol Police, the Washington, others, after they cleared the terrorists out of this building, we came back at 8 o'clock and voted. I spent the night in the basement of my office. I live a 20-minute walk away. I really didn't want to walk home that night. But I walked around about midnight, walked around this building over in the House, the Senate. I saw the destruction. I saw the window right upstairs from me, the half-moon window that terrorists with their flagpoles, with their Confederate flags and their Trump flags attached, broke through that window. When I was back there at midnight that night, already the cleanup from the custodians had started, cleaning up after they had been threatened, after they had been called names as black women, as immigrant women, after they had been called names by the terrorists. They were back at work cleaning up. Already a carpenter had taken a piece of cut a half-moon piece of plywood and nailed it to that window to keep safe this building and keep the elements out. We honor those people today. Some of the most, it's what service looks like. It's what love of country looks like. It's what the dignity of work looks like. It tells you a lot about what's wrong with our economy, that these buildings, essential workers, the people who prepare the food, the people who clean up, the people who provide security, the essential workers, like so many of their fellow service workers around this country, they don't make a lot of money, they don't get much attention, they don't get much reward, they don't have much power. We simply don't value and respect all work the way we should. I think of the words of Dr. King. One of my favorite Dr. King quotes, if a man is called to be a street sweeper, he should sweep streets even as Michelangelo painted or Beethoven composed music, or Shakespeare wrote poetry. He should sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will pause to say, here lived a great street sweeper who did his job well. Dr. King said, no work is insignificant. All labor that uplifts humanity has dignity and importance. No job, he later said, no job with adequate compensation is menial. Or look at the words of Pope Francis a few days ago in his Christmas Eve address. Or think back 100 years, 120 years to Pope Leo, the Labor Pope, in Rerum Novarum, when he first introduced, at least in my view, first introduced the term, I assume in Latin, but the term dignity of work. Pope Francis, on his Christmas Eve address just a few days ago, said, God reminds us of the importance of granting dignity to men and women through their labor, and also granting dignity to human labor itself. No work is those are Pope Francis's words. No work is insignificant. All labor has dignity. We ought to treat it that way, starting with honoring these workers. Last year, I joined my colleagues in a resolution to honor all the workers who risked their lives that day: custodians, maintenance workers, Capitol police officers, journalists, the floor staff, the workers in our offices. All of them serve this country. All of them risk their safety to preserve our democracy. All of them deserve our gratitude. Today, though, for tomorrow actually, but I will ask tonight, because my colleagues, because of Senator Isaacson's funeral, many will be there tomorrow. I asked my colleagues to join me and Senator Klobuchar and Schumer and Senators Casey and Booker in a resolution honoring specifically the Capitol janitorial and maintenance staff, all essential workers for their bravery and their service to our country on January 6th. One of my favorite parts of this job, and the presiding officer knows this because we've had these conversations, and her appreciation for work and for the people who work so hard and get so little. One of the joys of this job is to do what Abraham Lincoln used to say when his staff wanted him to stay in the White House and win the war and free the slaves and preserve the Union. Lincoln said, no, I got to go out and get my public opinion bath. One of the joys of this job is to talk to the workers here just about their lives or about what happened January 6th. One custodial worker and I were talking, and she's been in this country for 30 years. She has been a citizen for 20 years and she's worked in this job for 30 years. She's been a citizen for 20 years. And she and a number of others were locked in a room where terrorists were pounding on the walls and were screaming racial epithets and were making anti-immigrant, were screaming anti-immigrant utterance, all of that. Yet she still works there. She was one of the ones that had to clean up after them. As I said, the terrorists destroyed, the black and brown maintenance workers cleaned up, and the union tradespeople rebuilt. This resolution that I am going to offer tomorrow, this resolution reaffirms the Senate's commitment to strengthening their rights as workers, providing support and resources to ensure their health, well-being, safety, protection from further attacks. Their support should include higher pay. It should include collective bargaining rights for all of them. It should include paid sick leave and vacation leave. It should include comprehensive health insurance with mental health resources. Don't think that you all understand, many of these police officers, many of these custodial workers, many of the movers and the plumbers and the others that were locked in their rooms or offices or buildings during this, many of them, I'm not a mental health expert at all, but many of them, I'm sure, suffer from issues of nightmares and other kinds of anxieties that we need to help them. I hope my colleagues will join me, not as Republicans or Democrats, but as Americans, as members of this body. These workers serve us all. They allowed us to do our work for America that night after we essentially were run out of this room and were safe for several hours. They allowed us, because of their work, to come back here and be safe and do our jobs that we took an oath of office in January 3rd, 2021 to do. This building wouldn't function without them. No one should have to endure what they did at the hands of domestic terrorists. To the Capitol custodians and service workers who come to work in this building each day to ensure our democracy functions, thank you, thank you, thank you. I have this resolution honoring the Capitol's essential workers, applauding them for their service. I'd intended to try and pass this resolution by unanimous consent tomorrow, but I recognize that many of my colleagues are out of town at the funeral honoring one of the really good men or women, one of the good men that served in this body, Senator Johnny Isakson from Georgia. My hope is we can take this resolution up and pass this common sense resolution next week when we return. Thank you, Madam President.